Soundbooth Theater presents Shoot the Messenger, a paranormal space fantasy, Messenger Chronicles Book 1, written by Pippa DaCosta, narrated by Annie Ellicott, featuring Jeff Hayes as Marshal Kelly, Elodin, and the rest of the male cast. Part 1. Father, oh Father, what do we here, in this land of unbelief and fear? The land of dreams is better far above the light of the morning star. Older than William Blake. Chapter 1.
You have 18 seconds to live.
My hovering drone's voice sounded flat, the words spoken in the same way all secure messages were delivered. He might have equally said the weather outside Calicto's environmental domes had settled today, no ion storms on the horizon, or reminded the recipient to pick up a case of salt on his return journey from the mines. An awkward silence fell over the restaurant. The recipient, a stocky man of some 50 years with arms and legs the size of ventilation ducts, blinked in disbelief at the drone, and then narrowed those gritty eyes on me. "Soda?" I asked, professionally formal. Soda, the drone, wasn't much larger than a soccer ball. He didn't look at all threatening to anyone unfamiliar with military tech.
16 seconds.
The recipient dipped his greasy fingers into a small cup of synthetic cleaning fluid and wiped his hands dry on the shirt stretched over his barreled chest.
Is this some kind of joke, messenger?
I had delivered some unusual messages. A happy birthday ditty at a funeral, dates for illegal interspecies rendezvous, packages of sin, and parcels that squeaked in a decidedly living and illegal way. It wasn't my job to query the messages, just deliver them. But an 18-second death threat delivered by a drone and what he saw as a harmless messenger girl? Yeah, some might consider it amusing. I flicked my fingers against my palm, activating the ocular display and schedule for the day. The recipient's name blinked low in my vision, along with his date and place of birth, occupation, and current address. "You are Machinist Jose Crater of Calicto's Sector C, Level 4, Container 005, born GE 3015? He smirked, fat lips stretching.
That's me, but you'd better check your source. That message is definitely not for me.
He leaned back in his chair and spread his arms, oozing confidence. Too much confidence. I discreetly scanned the other tables. Seated at all of them were men and women equally smug as Crater. They chatted and laughed and did all those normal things, but several were carefully side-eyeing us with more than a passing interest. Most wore the typical ragged mine worker overalls, probably just clocked off the day shift. Crater and his crew weren't just machinists. People like him were the reason I delivered messages armed with a hot pistol and electrotech whip. I ignored the urge to reach for my whip and tacked a smile on my face that suggested, "Hey, I'm just the messenger. Let's all just get along." Crater grinned back. He was in his territory, surrounded by his people. If this was a joke, it was on me. Soda buzzed in the air to my left, hovering around 7 feet off the ground, patiently waiting for my instructions. Soda, secure observational tactical assistant, was seldom quiet. I pulled a palm-sized signature strip from my coat and tossed it onto the table. "The contents of the message are not my concern, sir. Acknowledge receipt and I'll be out of your hair." I winced. The guy likely had more hair on his back than on his head. His big grin wobbled.
I'm not acknowledging any tang.
He grunted, accent slipping into the outer Halow dialect.
Who sent it?
He asked. "The sender is anonymous," I drawled. Most secure messages were sent anonymously, a safeguard against the messenger getting picked up by the marshals and snitching on the senders. My messages had never been intercepted. He snorted.
Do you know who I am?
I considered reciting the information I had in his sizable file, just to irk him. But the onlookers were losing the humor in their glares. I did know of his reputation. He spearheaded the mine workers' union on a lovely backwater rock near Calicto's domes. He might have started out honorable, but word in the sinks was that he and his men were itching for a fight with the Halow government. The mine workers' creed and their arguments were none of my concern. I'd done my job, delivered the message. It was time to leave. The contents of a message, the sender, and the recipient are none of my concern, I repeated in a monotone. I'm just the messenger. Acknowledge receipt and I'll be on my way. A thumbprint will do. If he didn't acknowledge receipt, I didn't get my cut, which would mean another week of tasteless rations and no water. I couldn't remember the last time I'd tasted real water, the wet kind, not the synthetic syrup. He picked up the signature strip, pinched it between his chunky fingers, and regarded it with a sneer.
I've got a message for you to send back.
I sighed and rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. Do you know what anonymous means, Mr. Crater? It means put your fucking mark on the signature strip and acknowledge receipt before we have ourselves a disagreement. I peeled back my long coat, revealing the coiled metal linked whip and holstered pistol. Neither weapon was common Halow tech, and both would like to rip strips off Crater. To his credit, the surprise on his face was genuine, if diluted by years of lines and fractures. His cracked lips quivered. Right now, he would be wondering how a girl like me, armed to the collar of my long coat, had walked through the restaurant security sweeps without setting off a single alarm. Few people took the time to really consider the secure part in secure messenger, and fewer knew how it was done. I had just shot up in his estimations. Unfortunately, that new respect also meant the death threat suddenly had teeth. Crater shot to his feet, bumping the table and knocking over his cleaning fluid. I snatched for my whip. Someone nearby let out a bark of alarm. Weapons rattled. Crater opened his mouth, but whatever he was about to yell never left his lips. A precision blast tore off his lower jaw and ripped out much of his cheek. Half his face vanished in a splash of blood and bone, and the big man dropped like a sack of machine parts, dead before he hit the ground. I blinked, clearing a red blur from my right eye. Shock sank its claws into time, slowing everything around me to a crawl. Sniper. The open hatch leading out into the public catwalk was the only line of sight into the restaurant. Through the hatch, I saw people streaming back and forth, sliding in and out of view. But across the walkway, over the cavernous proportions of the central plaza, a flash of light glinted off a lens. My ocular readout measured the distance as 650 yards over a crowd and through cycling air currents. An impossible shot, even with guided ballistics. Time slammed back into motion. Crater's associates exploded from their tables. A pistol blast singed my hair. I whirled and ran for the exit. Another shot splattered a burning ball of sparks against the wall. I veered left, darting into the security sweeps. The system let me pass on through without so much as a blip, but when Crater's people rushed inside, guns hot, alarms shrilled and bars slammed down, sealing them inside with their howled curses. I dashed out of the restaurant and into the milling crowd. My hand instinctively rested on my whip. Magic buzzed up my arm, eager to be unleashed. A glance back through the crowd and it appeared clear. Crater's people weren't following, but they would as soon as they hacked their own security. I strode on, keeping my head down. I'd threatened Crater twice, including the original message, and I had been 2 feet away when his brain matter blew out the side of his face. It would be difficult to argue I wasn't the one who'd killed him. This was bad, but not over yet. Soda, what's the quickest route to the source of that shot? My drone wouldn't have missed the shot or its source. He captured and recorded everything.
The quickest route to getting dead, Kesh.
He replied, voice back to his normal, virtually human drawl and dripping with sarcasm. He hovered behind my shoulder, staying low to keep our pursuers from spotting him.
There's a tram arriving in 3 minutes.
He added, unprompted.
If we hurry, we can board, and we'll be back at your container in approximately 20 minutes.
Soda's plan was entirely too predictable and typical of the drone, who rarely thought much beyond his own self-preservation.
Soda, show me the route to where the shooter was holed up. Now!
An arrow blinked in my vision, pointing the way over catwalks, across the plaza, and into what looked like a block of habitat containers still under construction. Soda whispered smoothly,
Take the drone home. Spend the night in...
Shh! They won't follow us. We crossed the plaza. So far, so good. They'll think we ran for the trams.
Oh, fine.
Soda huffed. A smile lifted my lips. For an ex-military drone, he had a coward's protocols. That's what happened when you spliced the artificial intelligence of a personal assistant with an attack drone's processors. It made for some interesting late-night conversations. Soda hovered closer to my shoulder, stirring my hair.
Did you see what happened to his face?
He mock-whispered.
I don't want that to happen to my face.
You don't have a face. I veered off, out of the crowd, toward the massive stacks of residential containers. Digital security threw a laser net across the site's entrance. Teasing a few magical threads, I sent out a mental push. The laser-like mesh peeled open, inviting me inside. I stepped through, and Soda buzzed in low behind me. The lasers zipped closed behind us. Soda scanned the yard. With space inside Calicto's environmental domes at a premium, the site entrance immediately funneled into a narrow security scanner. Soda's single large lens of an eye screwed down, reducing its pupil to a red dot. That intense red dot of the Soda drones was often the last thing many soldiers saw right before they had their bones flash incinerated. But Soda couldn't hurt me. Down, boy. I'll protect you. I flashed Soda a grin and plucked my whip free. Its crackling magic-charged length uncoiled, spilling blue sparks across the floor and over my boots. Stay close. He tucked in close, static energy tickling my neck. Just like at the restaurant security, we walked through the scanners, barely stirring more than a fine layer of dust. As far as the tech was concerned, we didn't exist.
You are creepy,
Soda reported, the words all the more amusing when coming from a tactical drone. Around us, the habitat containers had been slotted into place, each potential new home stacked on top of another, climbing 20 stories high. I entered the nearest container and peered out through an open window. Someday soon, it would be someone's single window overlooking the plaza outside. At ground level, we were too low for the shooter to get a clear shot. He or she had to be several levels above. My boots left shallow impressions in a layer of metal shaving dust as I walked down the single main corridor toward the stairs module. The air tasted metallic and tinged with something organic that tugged on my memory. Something sweet and tempting. I shook my head, shrugging off the familiar sensation. Any movement ahead of us?
Nothing on this level.
Anything above? His motors whirred.
Maybe.
I rolled my eyes. Can you be more specific?
No. Something is blocking my sensors beyond 20 meters.
That was unusual. Soda's sensors were some of the most advanced available. If they were blocked, someone was deliberately hiding something, or themselves, from scanners. Activate stealth, I ordered.
Really?
His motors whined. Do we have to go through this every time?
It's a terrible drain on my battery.
Soda received the look I reserved for assholes and disobedient drones everywhere. His background buzzing ceased. His matte black, chunky outer shell cracked open and reformed into a conical shape. His coating rippled, turning him almost entirely transparent, except for a slight reflective dissonance with his surroundings. He couldn't activate his weapons while stealthed, but he made a great scout. I nodded at my drone and tracked his rippling distortion in the air until he disappeared up the stairs. A small box in the corner of my vision relayed Soda's point of view. I watched from the bottom of the stairs as he drifted down a corridor exactly like the others in this block. Vacant doorways gaped left and right. "Stop," I whispered. "Look down." He focused on the gray patches tracking down the corridor. Footprints. Large, with deep treads, likely male and probably from the mines. Factory workers weren't equipped with heavy work boots. "Careful," I warned Soda. He focused his lens down the corridor. "I don't see anything else." He couldn't reply, not while stealthed. Something I'd promised I would rectify once I had the right equipment for his next upgrade. I climbed the stairs and saw the boot prints leading away. They originated in the first right-hand container. A quick glance inside revealed a gap in the wall where it hadn't yet been sealed to its neighbor. A plastic sheet flapped in the wind, and outside, a crane's boom rested a few meters from the edge. That had been our suspect's point of entry. Whoever he was, he must have had balls the size of boulders to climb that crane. This had been planned, just like the message. "You have 18 seconds to live." Whoever orchestrated this had lain in wait, knowing I would arrive with that message. 18 seconds. Long enough to line up the target in their crosshairs. That didn't account for the impossible shot through various air currents in a busy crowd. Something more did that. Soda's outline wobbled with dissent. He didn't want to do this, but when I salvaged him, this had been part of the deal. I fixed him, and he worked for me. Besides, leaving wasn't an option. Crater's crew wouldn't forget I'd apparently assassinated their leader right in front of them, unless I found evidence that I hadn't fired the shot. Soda would have recorded the scene, but it wouldn't be enough. Images could be doctored. Plus, Crater's kind were the kill first, ask questions later type. Oh, they may eventually realize I hadn't taken my pistol out, and a point-blank pistol shot couldn't have made the bloody mess that had been Crater's face, right after tossing my remains into the Calicto wind. What was another dead messenger to them? I'd already lost my commission, but my reputation was still salvageable if I caught the real killer. The boot prints led me down the corridor. My whip's magically charged tendrils licked at my ankles. Soda was a ripple in the air a few meters ahead. With a brief nod from me, he drifted forward through a doorway. Soda's feed flickered in my vision. He looked down, revealing a sweet piece of kit, a high-powered rifle resting on its stand. I stepped into the room. "Deactivate stealth." Soda hovered in close to the rifle while his gears and plating rebuilt his armor, once again cloaking him in matte black. His lens grew, telescopic action letting Soda get an up-close look at the weapon.
Its construction doesn't match any in my databanks.
If a tactical drone didn't recognize it, then the rifle was rare, possibly unique.
Self-guided projectiles.
Soda went on.
Neuro-controlled. This rifle is not human-compatible.
Soda's voice held a note of awe.
Is it wrong that I'm a little turned on right now?
I chuckled and crouched on the opposite side of the gun.
You're always turned on.
Reaching out a hand, I stopped short of touching the weapon. The last thing I needed was to leave evidence of my being here. Soda swiveled toward me.
Kesh!
A hand twisted in my hair, yanking me up and shoving me forward. My cheek hit the wall, rattling my teeth and igniting fiery pain through my jaw. I flicked my whip, or tried to, but a vice-like hand twisted my arm behind my back, angling my shoulder on the edge of agony. Another twitch and my attacker would break my arm. "Retaliate with equal force!" I hissed, knowing Soda would fry this asshole in seconds. I'd lost Soda's view in my vision when he dropped stealth, but I didn't need to see whoever it was. Any second now, Soda's armory would buzz and turn this guy to dust. Any second.
Sorry, messenger.
A smooth male voice purred. coming in close to deliver his words and brushing them against the curve of my neck like a lover delivering promises.
Your drone is not responding.
I jerked my head back, slamming my skull into bone with a satisfying crunch. He grunted, grip loosening. I bucked free and whirled on him, teeth bared, whip cracking, sparks flying. And froze. Proto-Fae. No. It can't be. This one didn't look like the willowy wraiths often depicted in history books. Strength radiated from a powerful physique honed over the years for battle. Under his arm, he'd trapped Soda, and where his sleeve rode up, dark, intricate tattoos marked his skin. Those marks told me exactly what he was. A warfae. A dribble of blood ran from his nose. He ran his tongue over his lip, licking it clean. Impossible. He couldn't be here. The treaty forbade it. His lips held a wild snarl, the type issuing a warning. That same warning burned in his long-lashed blue eyes. Soda was silent, the Fae's biceps strained, trapping my drone still. I blinked, almost expecting him to vanish and for this to be a hallucination. But he hadn't moved, and there, gripped in his hand and pressed against Soda's casing, a slim silver device blinked a single blue light. A portable EMP. One hit and Soda's personality would be fried. Soda was unique. Losing him wasn't an option. Soda's red eye stared through me. Don't! I pushed out an empty hand, showing the Fae how I wasn't attacking. If he decided I was too much trouble, my whip wouldn't save me. I scrabbled around my head for the correct protocols, but the shock of seeing him here tripped me up. Should I kneel to him? I would have once. His eyes flicked between the drone and me, reading my face, my fear, scrutinizing it all. Sharp, angular features spoke of the cruelty he was capable of. His dark hair was pulled back in a tight, intricate braid and clasped close against his skull, further accentuating his knuckle-breaking bone structure. Black battle tattoos tracked down his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. The more tattoos a Fae had, the more enemies they had killed. How many did he have? I had tattoos like his, but I wasn't Fae. I never would be, never could be, despite my sacrifices. I swallowed. That drone! Please don't take him! It... How could I explain to a Fae that I needed Soda? Needed tech, like I needed a part of me. I don't care what you are. I won't tell anyone you were here. He regarded the whip-and pistol and raked his derisive glare over me, making it clear how he looked down on my kind, humankind, with disdain.
No, you won't.
He backed out of the door. No, no, no. My drone was irreplaceable. I'd built him from discarded scraps and fragments of code, given him a new life. To begin with, he had served a purpose, but he had grown into more than a tool. Soda was my friend. I dashed after the Fae and darted down the corridor, following snippets of his shadow. Fae were too fast, one of the many reasons they thought themselves superior. But I'd learned to be fast too, learned to run with them, hunt with them, and to be hunted. It had been so long, and those memories were so deeply hidden they almost felt as though they belonged to another person. How could he be here? It didn't matter. I needed to win this. That damn drone was everything to me, and more. The secrets he held. If they got into the wrong hands. Seeing him swing around a corner and hammer down the stairs, I dashed ahead, bounced off the wall and leaped down the stairs in one pounce, landing and launching into a run. There, ahead, he sprinted in a blur, dark braid lashing. Maybe I could catch him. Maybe. He shot through an open segment of a container and launched into the air, apparently at nothing. He fell, and landed in a perfect roll on a neighboring block of containers. I didn't hesitate, didn't slow down. My boot hit the edge and I sprang. There was never any doubt I would make it. I hit the container roof and fell into a roll, snapping pain through my shoulder. The momentum carried me onto my feet. He was gone again, darting downward, leaping and vaulting over gaps and barriers. Down, down, down. Impossibly fast. I hesitated at the edge of a 160-foot drop. A hover tram pulled away from the tram stop below us. The jump I needed to make was too far. Recycled air pushed at my face, whispering encouragement. He was already racing toward the edge of another roof, free-running closer and closer toward the moving tram. It was already too late. I'd never catch him in time. I plucked my pistol free, lined up my sights. He dropped off the edge, fell through the air like an arrow, and landed cat-like, poised on the tram's roof. Crosshairs danced across his back. I tugged the trigger. The pistol spat and my heart leaped. The Fae feigned left, avoiding the bullet as easily as if I'd thrown a stone. He has soda. The warfae straightened on the tram's roof, rocking with its movement. He turned. The wind tugged at his dark clothing and whipped his braid across his shoulder. A vicious smile slashed across his lips, the kind of smile I'd seen before, heralding the death of so many. Malice flashed in his eyes. His glare bored through me, daring me to chase him down. I lowered my pistol. Under his arm, Soda was silent, his lens dark. I reached through the mental link but found it stretched too thin to be of any use. "I'm coming for you, my friend," I sent. The words had barely left when the link snapped, whipping back against my psyche. There was no way of knowing if Soda had heard. I pointed at the warfae and mouthed, "I'll find you." With the challenge laid down, his savage smile grew until the tram carried him out of sight between container towers. Dry air washed over me from a hovercab above. I turned on the spot, suddenly exposed. My message recipient was dead, killed by me, apparently, and a warfae had just stolen the evidence of my innocence. Sirens squealed in the distance. I turned away from the edge and dropped onto rickety scaffolding out of plain sight and into the thick shadows where metal clanged and cloying air hung limp. I had to find Soda. If that Fae discovered my secrets, more than just my life would be at stake. Chapter 2. Lights blinked on in my habitat container, welcoming me home with warm, tropical sunset hues. Soda had set the theme, saying he liked to feel the warmth in the light. I'd given up correcting him on the limitations of his feelings. He liked his fiction. Now, the white and orange halos of color splashed against the wall only reminded me that he wasn't here to argue. Lights. Default. The lights lifted to a brighter white, illuminating the small rectangular space I called home. The one window looked out into a narrow gully between containers, affording a view consisting of a 5x5 patch of corrugated cladding for the identical rows of containers opposite mine. I pulled the blind down and flicked a switch to turn on the fake rain-on-glass projection. I hadn't felt real rain in a long time. The projection was nothing like the real thing. The fresh, clean smell, the pitter-pattering sound. Best not to think on it. I'd already woken too many memories today. Unhooking my whip and pistol, I set both weapons down on the kitchen counter and shrugged off my coat. A few dark spots marred the coat's fabric. Any permanent marks would interfere with the garment's ability to enhance my tech whispering. Hopefully, its self-clean coating would soon break down the blood. I planted my hands on my hips and scanned my container. How was it possible this space felt smaller? Soda's dock sat empty. Its receiving light blinked, searching for the drone's signal. I would get him back. So the guy was a Fae. So he'd killed a mine worker. I had faced much worse. Tussling with the Fae hadn't been on today's to-do list. Get up, go to work, deliver messages, come home again, rattle around my container, maybe drop by the boot. My days weren't complicated. That's the way I liked it. Easy. No drama. That was the way it had to be. I watched the fake rain stream down the projector screen, like 1,000 tears. How long had it been? 5 years? And in all that time I had never once slipped. Here, I was a nobody, just a messenger, invisible to people as well as tech. But now? This wasn't about me. It couldn't be. The Fae had taken Soda because of the footage of the assassination, leaving me to take the fall. That was all. I combed my fingers through my hair and winced as my nail snagged on a dried clump of something I didn't want to think too hard on. Stripping off, I stepped into the shower tube and braced both hands against the pads. Air mixed with chemicals blasted over me from above. The burn quickly faded to an almost pleasurable numbness. Dark, swirling thorn tattoos marked my skin. Sometimes I thought they looked like vines, other times like shackles. Reminders. Brands. Memories. I pushed the thoughts away and ignored it all, like always. At least Crater's death had been quick. The asshole hadn't seen his end coming. That had to be better than having death stalk you for weeks, months, years. A criminal like him? He must have known somebody would take him out eventually. But why did the warfae want Crater dead? How was a mine worker embroiled with a fae who shouldn't exist? A fae who used tech. A fae who moved freely on Calicto 1,000 years since the treaty. Enough damned time had passed that most common people thought they were a myth. A story told to keep foolish settlers from roaming into the no-go zones at the edges of Halow space. Doesn't matter. Soda had the evidence I needed. His footage of the scene was the only definitive proof that I was innocent. I had to get him back. Whatever Crater and the Fae were involved in, I didn't need to know the whys or what fors. Dry-showered and skin buzzing, I dressed, tossed back a protein bar, and flicked on the newsfeed. An image flickered in the air, recoiling from my resonance. I moved away, and the picture cleared. Was a prominent figure among the mine workers' union, having successfully campaigned for a substantial ration increase. I picked up my coat and brushed the dried blood off. Authorities have admitted that there appears to be no recorded evidence of the assassination, and that the security systems failed to detain the offender, who is still at large. Archon, the manufacturer of 90% of Halow's surveillance and detainment systems, chose not to comment. Archon. I snorted a laugh. They had sent someone after me after learning that an illegal messenger could stroll through their tech as easily as walking through an open door. Of course, they had brought all their ultra-enhanced tech with them. Their conclusion? I didn't exist. Tech whisperers were a myth. Their security was infallible. That was the day I upped my delivery rates. Was that how the Fae had eluded Calicto's planet-wide scanners? How else might an armed Fae move so freely in one of the most monitored societies in the Halow system? My smile faded. Everyone left a trail on Calicto, if you knew where to look. I threw my coat over my shoulders and hitched my weapons. I was getting my drone back, and no mythical warfae would stand in my way. The air in the market gully smelled like salted meats, sweating spices, and the press of too many bodies all funneled into a narrow stretch of street wedged between 2 rows of tightly packed habitat containers. This was Sage, Calicto's B sector, and my neighborhood. Vast fans hummed above, drawing air through the gully and recycling it through various filters, only to push it out again below our feet, drier and laced with something sweet and sickly. Some bureaucrat a million miles away probably had to tick a box labeled Calicto Aid and figured the smell of flowers would put smiles on our faces. Unfortunately, what they couldn't have known unless they'd bothered to take the time to visit was that artificial fragrance mixed with Calicto's habitat air made a nauseating combination. I had lived here for enough rotations that it no longer turned my stomach, but it kept home container prices down and the tourists away, just the way Sector Bs like me preferred. I carved through the crowds alone. Usually, Soda would be providing a running commentary, listing any new imports from around the Halow system. He prattled on about nonsense so often that I filtered him out. But now that I was alone, I missed the constant stream of information and found myself strangely disconnected from the goings-on around me. I also missed his early detection sensors. He could have spotted any of Crater's gang long before me. It was unlikely Crater's crew would track me back to B Sector. Like their security sweeps, I'd whispered my way around any nearby monitoring devices, preventing them from capturing my image. But there was always a chance I'd missed a device, especially if any of his crew had ocular implants. Biotech was difficult to whisper around. I nodded at a few familiar faces. Questions lit up in their eyes when they noticed I didn't have Soda shadowing me. I hurried deeper into the gully where the lights struggled to penetrate the gloom. Naked cables crisscrossed the space above the gully, turning the thoroughfare into a tunnel. It's widely known that all the best things happen in the sinks, the name given to this end of the gully. Best, for B sectors, generally meant rowdy, dirty, and probably illegal. Cameras had long ago failed, leaving the authorities blind to the sinks, and none had dared to venture down here to fix them. Not in sight, not in mind, as Mary liked to say. It was Mary I saw as I peeled back the thick, leathery drape and entered her ramshackle hut. Mary wore a high-collared coat, buttoned all the way from her ankles to her chin. I'd never seen her wear anything else, but I'd never seen her outside the hut either. She muttered to herself, lost in concentration as she lifted storage boxes and shuffled various bits of substation trinkets around the large front desk. Mary. I let the drape fall closed behind me, muting the sink's background hum.
Yes, yes.
Mary waved long fingers at me, either shooing me away or just acknowledging my arrival. She continued to flit about behind the desk, scurrying back and forth. Crater is dead.
Crater? Crater? Should Mary know Crater?
She asked quickly. One of today's recipients and the mine workers' union leader. She stopped, straightening from her hunched posture, and finally looked over.
Oh.
Her nose twitched, a sure sign she was disappointed.
Before or after Kesh got her cut?
Before. Her glossy marble-like eyes contracted. There was little Mary hated more than not getting paid. It gets worse, I said. Crater's crew thinks I killed their leader, and the evidence I didn't is on Soda, but he was stolen from me.
Stolen? Ha!
She barked a short, tinny laugh and went back to her searching.
Must be some thief to steal drone from Kesh.
Some thief, indeed. I couldn't tell her about the Fae. At best, she would think I was lying. At worst, she would alert the authorities, and I'd suddenly be at the center of a planet-wide Fae hunt, and I did not want that heat. The less attention on me, the easier things were. Mary, I need to know who sent the message. She shook her head.
No, no, no,
and pointed a finger.
Kesh know that information is secure. Mary not paid for snooping. Mary paid for discretion.
I know that. I reined in the frustration from my voice, but Mary's ears heard everything. Her wiry eyebrows pinched inward. But this is different, I told her. He has Soda.
Pfft. Make another drone. Take another message. Innocence easy to prove. Surveillance.
She circled her hand above her head, even though we both knew there was no surveillance in the sinks. For people like Mary, it was easy to forget how the surveillance that monitored them, kept them safe, didn't apply to me. Normally, being a tech whisperer was an advantage, but not today. Not when I needed that proof. If there was any footage out there, it probably consisted of me running away from the scene. Soda is unique, I said carefully. And you know there's no surveillance around me. You don't have to tell me who sent the message. Just point me in the right direction. That way, your discretion will be intact, and I'll leave you alone. Mary looked at me as though debating if I was worth the trouble. We weren't friends. At best, we were business associates. She was probably wondering how far I would push this.
Job came from Istvan. Unlikely real name.
She scratched at her neck.
I get your location code. You track. Then no more.
A code would be enough to narrow down the sender's vicinity. It should be easy enough to track down an Istvan from there. Finding the sender would lead me to the Fae. He had to be involved with the message to have known when to shoot Crater. Mary whipped a data strip off her desktop and swept her finger across it, leaving behind a 6-digit number.
There. Go.
I scooped up the strip and memorized the number.
And do your job!
She called as I pushed through the drape. The assault of hot and spicy smells wrapped around me. Whipping fans, distant clangs of metal on metal, and the chatter from stacked containers accompanied my walk deep into the sinks. I flicked my collar up, kept my chin tucked down, and moved among the drifters. Anyone down on their luck usually got washed into the sinks. The homeless, the unemployed or unemployable, or those system-wide drifters who had never had a home to call their own. There were plenty of vultures here, too. I passed brightly lit sex parlors, pawn stores, beggars, and bars. One of the most popular bars was the Boot, a mismatch of modified containers stacked together like kids' plastic blocks and arranged over various floors. A lot of business went down in the Boot, most of it illegal. I pushed through the swinging steel doors. Heading toward the bar, I caught sight of my reflection in the dozens of mirrors hanging on one wall. There had to be roughly 50 people in the main bar, where I'd just entered. Now 52, including me and the tail I'd picked up after leaving Mary's. He wasn't the most discreet of tails. The guy had a limp and wore overalls dirtied up with grease from boring machines. I'd turned into the Boot as a final check, and sure enough, there was his reflection in the patina-marred hanging mirrors, pushing through the doors and scanning the crowd for me. Julia! I leaned on the bar and waved over the dark-skinned, bright-eyed woman behind the bar. Double eyelids flickered at the sight of me. Kesh! She finished pouring a customer a drink, then slinked my way, shoulders and hips swaying rhythmically. Hey, Julia. Is Kempa working? Sure she is. She grinned and poured me a drink. She's around here somewhere. You looking for a little action, Kesh? She raised an eyebrow and grinned like she had just won a bet. Didn't know you swung that way, darling. Ask nicely and I bet she'll do it for free. We've all been wondering what's under that coat of yours. You'll find out the day you tell me what you really are, Julia. She wasn't human, of that I was certain. She chuckled and leaned in. What I am would blow your little mind, Kesh Lasota. Is that a promise? It was harmless banter, the same teasing we had tossed both ways all the years I'd been coming to the Boot. I couldn't say Julia's words didn't draw me in. Curiosity was a weakness of mine, and there was something about Julia that made her irresistible. For you, darling, you know it. She giggled and, spotting Kempa, waved her over. Get that drone of yours to film you two in action and I can make you a pretty sum. I recoiled and pulled a face. Too much? She shrugged. Can't blame a girl for trying. Hey, Kesh. Kempa leaned a hip against the bar and examined her long nails. Nanotech glistened on the tip of each finger, working to finish each nail's polish in a glossy red. She had already had them work on her face, smoothing away lines. About that thing, she murmured, averting her gaze. You did. It worked, so, thank you. That thing had been a particularly nasty low-life stalker who had figured no didn't apply to him. I'd made sure the right kind of evidence, most of it legitimate, some of it fabricated, found its way to the right kind of marshals to get him off her back and put down for a few rotations. That thing wouldn't be bothering her or anyone for the next couple of decades. You're welcome. I picked up my drink and gulped half of it down. A pleasant warmth filled some of the emptiness Soda's theft had left me with. I would have liked to stay, maybe share a few drinks, but my tail would probably be calling in backup soon. I need to call in that favor. Kempa straightened. Oh? You see that stiff by the table in the corner? The old guy on his own, pretending he can blend in like a whore at a virgin ceremony.
Go keep him company while I slip out the back?
Scarlet lips broadened into a wide smile. My pleasure, she purred. The tech she wore in her hair and inside the seams of her clothing shimmered into action, simulating long lashes, slightly wider eyes, and fuller lips. I watched her sashay her way over to my tail and pour all her alluring self into his lap. He wouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon.
You in trouble?
Julia quietly asked. I shook my head and pushed away from the bar. Just a little unwanted attention. I'll catch you later. Crater's men didn't think much of me if they'd sent one guy with a limp to track me down. Hopefully, they would continue to think little of me. Their mistake would sure make my life easier while I searched for the Fae. I stepped out into the narrow alley behind the boot and blinked into the purplish light, adjusting my eyes to the contrasting shadows and glare. A silhouetted figure lumbered toward me, shoulders almost touching the containers stacked either side of him. To my right, another figure swaggered forward, his knuckles dressed in steel. Ah, not so stupid. Limpy had been the decoy. I reached inside my coat. You guys sure you want to do this? My whip uncoiled, spilling sparks around my boots. Magic tingled across the back of my hand and up my arm, urging me on. The men didn't answer and kept on coming. Time to get my hands dirty.
I didn't kill your boss.
I stepped forward, placing myself in the middle of the alley. The light from my whip sent my shadow dancing on the metallic walls. The guy on my left peeled his coat back and freed a pistol, his lips pulled back in a snarling smile.
So who did?
Knuckles grumbled.
The Tooth Fairy?
Some kind of fairy, I muttered. Nobody would joke about the Tooth Fairy had they met the terrifying origin of that myth. I eased more magic into the whip. These guys were easily twice my weight and probably strong enough to punch me through a wall if they could catch me. I tightened my grip on the whip. Here's what's about to happen. You surrender and maybe I don't put you down. How does that sound?
Sounds like you've taken too many hits to the head, messenger.
Lefty snickered. While he taunted me, he lowered the pistol.
So why don't you come along nicely with us, eh?
His lips parted, and his stubby tongue darted out to wet his cracked lips.
Maybe you come nicely and we don't have to rough you up some?
I chuckled dryly. I hate to disappoint you.
The night's young. We're just getting started,
Knuckles said, picking up on Lefty's lascivious glances. They stopped within arm's reach, one on either side of me, leaving nowhere left for me to go. Oh, what a fragile little messenger. How would I ever escape the mean and scary thugs? I stomped on Lefty's foot. He jerked forward, swinging wildly for me. I sidestepped, and Knuckles' glowing fist hit his pal square in the face. Lefty grunted, and blood spurted from his nose. I kicked high, jabbing my heel into Knuckles' gut. While he bowed over, I cracked my whip open and looped it around an iron strut braced across the alley above. Hauling myself out from between them, I planted both boots on the wall, kicked out, and freed the whip from the strut, landing on all fours. I sprang forward, away from Crater's men. Knuckles snarled something behind me, but I was already out of the alley and darting across the sink's ramshackle street into a narrow, shadow-filled gullet. Electric heaters buzzed, slung like street lamps outside of shanty homes. None of the homeless cared who I was or why I was running. Few bothered to look up as I dashed past.
Hey!
Knuckles' shout echoed after me. I'd lose him in the sinks, as long as I kept switching back. I slammed into a wall that hadn't been there a blink before, and I would have bounced right off it if the wall's arms hadn't clamped around me.
Easy there, lady.
Typical. Some guy wanted to be the hero. I shoved against the man's chest and spotted the golden star of the law pinned to his coat. A marshal. Really? Of all the people I could have run into, it had to be a lawman. Turning my head away, I checked behind me. Knuckles wasn't there. The law had probably spooked him. Marshals were good for that, at least.
Get your hands off me! I snapped, probably too harshly. His grip eased. I pushed out and quickly stepped around him. No need for a fuss, I'll just be on my way. What was a lawman doing in the sinks? They almost never ventured down here.
Wait a second.
He drawled. With my back to him as I picked up my pace, I discreetly recoiled my whip and tucked it inside my coat.
Hey, girlie!
What did he just call me?
Stop!
He barked. I stopped. Shutters on the nearby containers rattled closed. Yeah, go on, cowards. Hide from the lawman. I heard his boots crunch on gravel, and then I saw that wall-like chest again. The marshal's star winked. He wouldn't drop this. I would have to look him in the eye and have a conversation. Hopefully, words would be enough. I'd already assassinated a terrorist today. I didn't want to add a marshal to that list.
The sinks are no place for a lady.
I snorted. Luckily, I've never been one. I flicked my hair out of my eyes and looked up. By sin, he was way too pretty to be anywhere near the sinks, let alone be wearing a marshal's star. I'd seen tech shifters pretty themselves up, and they'd still only been half as handsome as this marshal. Hair as black as onyx and green eyes that looked to be laughing even though his mouth held a firm, authoritative line. It wasn't authentic. Nobody was that good-looking without enhancements.
Do you need an escort?
He asked. Was he for real? I raked my glare over his pretty boyness. Do you? His long coat reached to his dark boots, keeping the sink's metallic dust off his clothes. His coat likely hid various weapons. Was he as quick of a draw as I was? A spark of something ignited in his eyes. I wasn't sure if I'd pissed him off or if he was secretly laughing. Poking him some more would yield interesting results, but every second I wasted was another second Crater's men would use to outflank me. He studied me, my face, my coat, taking his time, reading every inch. If he liked what he saw, his expression showed no sign of it. He stepped aside, graciously sweeping a hand out.
It seems I misjudged you.
His voice, smooth and warm and curiously arousing, could have melted steel. And didn't he talk all proper-like? Mr. Marshall was well educated. The sinks would eat him alive. Good riddance. I strode on by him, ignoring the tiny pang of regret that I likely wouldn't get to admire that face again. I'd managed a few steps when he raised his voice, asking,
Do you have a license for that whip?
Oh, he'd spotted my discreet concealment. I walked on without missing a beat. Carrying any weapon in public required all manner of background checks I had neglected to take. Do you have a license for all that pretty, Marshal? There must be a law against allowing that sexy out in public. He didn't reply. My steps slowed. Don't look. Don't look. He wants you to look. Keep going. Leave right now. Just one peek. It would be a crime not to. I glanced over my shoulder. Trash tumbled, and the spark of a shorted-out cable hissed beside a dumpster. But the alley was empty. And possibly, the marshal had given me the slip. My steps faltered. He couldn't have gone far. He'd been there just moments ago. I scanned the narrow alley but found no traces of him, or anyone. It was probably for the best. If my luck held, that would be the last I ever saw of him. Striding on, I put the encounter behind me. Whatever he was doing in the sinks, he had better get in and out quickly. Would I just walk away and leave the pretty boy to get stabbed and left in the gutter? My pace slowed. I didn't have time to babysit the suicidal pretty boy. I checked my ocular map for Mary's location code coordinates. The sender, Istvan's zone, was a few quick tram rides away. I had some time to check that the marshal wasn't about to get stabbed in the back. Shiny stars like his often turned up on the black market, usually tarnished with blood. I stopped, looked back. Still nothing. He'd be fine. I flicked my collar up and headed out of the sinks. The marshal was on his own. Chapter 3. I stood outside the glittering pyramid made of shimmering metals and translucent plastics, and wondered if the universe had a sense of humor at my expense. First, a death threat via messenger, and then this. Smartly dressed people milled up and down the entrance steps. Beside the grand entrance, the name of the corporation that owned the building was carved into a shiny slab of stone, proclaiming its permanence. Archon. Istvan had sent the death threat from Archon headquarters. Archon. The same company that had hunted me and, after failing to catch me, deemed I didn't exist. The same company whose state-of-the-art surveillance and security washed off me daily. Wonderful. I set myself up in an eatery across the street and browsed the datanet for any Archon staff members called Istvan. Sure enough, Istvan was on the payroll, but it was worse than I imagined. He wasn't some grunt holed up in the basement. He signed the company's checks. Istvan Larsen was Archon's CEO. I fell back in my seat and squinted at the ostentatious pyramid through the window. Why was Archon's CEO sending illegal death threats via the underground messenger network? And why did he want a mine worker on the other end of the Calicto demographic spectrum dead? Men like Istvan Larsen and Crater didn't mix, but something had caused them to cross paths. Did Crater have something on Istvan? Or something on Archon? If that was the case, surely there had to be a tidier way of assassinating a mine worker than sending a fae after him. How could Archon's CEO contact a fae, let alone convince him to kill for him? All the questions set my thoughts spinning. I was missing something. I was missing a lot of things. None of this made any logical sense. Doesn't matter, I reminded myself. I'm not here for the whys and what-fors. Istvan was my connection to the fae who had soda. A fae I was going to put down. He wouldn't be smiling when I caught up with him. He'd surprised me. That wouldn't happen again. When next we met, I'd be ready. Opening my palm, I tapped the contact link for Archon. "Good day, this is Archon Systems. How may I direct your call?" A polite female voice asked. "Hello." I polished my accent into something more like the marshal's fancy talk. "I'm Lucy Walker with the Calicto News Agency. We are running a story on Archon's failure to detain the criminal behind the Crater assassination. Would Mr. Larsen be available to comment?" Much call-holding and transferring ensued, but I eventually secured a meeting with the top man himself. I was to meet him in 20 minutes, leaving little time to smarten up my appearance. It was a good thing I'd come prepared. After checking I was alone in the restroom, I shrugged off my coat, turned it inside out, and tugged it back on. The rows of mirrors above the sinks reflected my image back at me. Time for a change. Marching into Archon in my messenger garb would likely get me arrested. A tap of my palm and my ocular display sent an array of possible appearances across my vision. I selected one and watched the coat go to work. Its length reeled in, pulling up to just above my knee, while wrapping me in the illusion of little shoes, office pants, and a slim-fitting jacket. The illusion wouldn't stand up to physical scrutiny, but I didn't plan on getting too close to Larsen. I smiled. The girl in the mirror smiled back as her short hair grew out and turned white. I twirled the ponytail around my fingers, plucked a chrome stiletto from a hidden pocket inside my coat, and used it to pin my hair up. There, perfectly respectable. What do you know? I was a lady. A gaggle of school children was being led around Archon's foyer when I arrived at the front desk. They giggled, shoes squeaking against Archon's shiny floors, while their teacher pointed out the sculptural facets of the building's cathedral proportions. "Mr. Larsen will be right down, Miss Walker." The receptionist beamed. Her nameplate read, Caroline Ludo. "While you're waiting, would you please apply your thumbprint to the scanner?" "Sure." I pressed my thumb to the little scanner on the desk. The light blinked red. I tried again. Another blink.
It doesn't appear to be working. Oh, let's take a look. She swiped a few fingers across the scanner. Try now. I obliged, with no luck. Huh, now isn't that strange? Miss Ludo remarked. Not really. I guess I'll just... She rifled below her desk and pulled out a tech pad. My apologies. I don't know why it's not working. Please place your hand here. I pressed my hand to the pad, and predictably, it blipped a negative reading. I wasn't worried. Tech failure was extremely rare, so when it did fail, people often made mistakes, like not logging me in. Well, that is really unusual. I've never had 2 failed readings. I shrugged. I guess Archon doesn't make 'em like they used to, huh? She frowned. No. Removing the pad, she squinted at her tactile screens for a few moments and muttered, I guess I'll just enter you manually. While she swiped and tapped her screens, I admired the glittering foyer. Cameras monitored the entrance from all angles. They looked like silver baubles hanging in the corners. Later, when someone high up Archon's ranks reviewed this footage, they'd be alarmed to find Miss Ludo apparently talking to air. It was almost a shame I wouldn't be around to see them lose their little minds over me.
Miss Walker?
The man who thrust his hand out seemed younger in person than in the flat image on the corporation's datanet. His storm gray suit would have been unremarkable if not for the scarlet tie. Short, sandy blonde hair held hints of curls. Something the datanet hadn't captured was the intelligent sparkle in his eyes. Ocular implants. Biotech. I internally scolded myself. Of course the CEO of Archon would be sporting its latest tech. Depending on his upgrade, he might see right through my illusion. I didn't think he had, or else his security would have been getting up close and personal. Perhaps his implants were for another reason? I avoided the handshake and replied coolly, Mr. Larson, you're doing the right thing by speaking with me. For our piece to go live without a comment would be quite damaging. He withdrew his hand, only briefly thrown off balance by my cold shoulder.
Indeed. A terrible business.
He buttoned his jacket and nodded to Miss Ludo.
Is the meeting suite available?
Yes, Mr. Larson. We had trouble with the sign-in process.
See to it.
He interrupted, and this time his tone held a dangerous edge that belied his charming smile. He turned to me.
I appreciate you meeting with me. Would you like a tour?
All traces of that razor's edge had vanished. A tour?
Of the building. Most everyone wants the tour. Archon isn't generally open to the public.
My smile was cutting. I'm not most everyone, Mr. Larson. Let's find somewhere to talk privately, shall we? He hesitated, just a few seconds, but it was enough to dislodge some of his good-natured ambiance.
Of course. This way.
I followed his swift pace, wondering if Archon's staff had underestimated Larson and later paid the price. From my brief scan of his public persona, I knew he had built Archon from the ground up. At just 26, that was quite an achievement. His personal records weren't public knowledge, but the gossip on the net said he was of old earthen blood, which might account for his elevated status in society. Larson escorted me into a private elevator where a few minutes of painful silence incubated many, many questions between us. A tiny camera stared down at us. A man with Larson's resources could easily track someone like Crater and know exactly where he would be. Then all he had to do was send in the Fae. I side-eyed Larson. He didn't look dangerous, but neither did I. The elevator doors opened into a carpeted hallway, dressed in muted reds and wooden panels that must have cost a planetary fortune. I curled my fingers into fists to stop from reaching out and stroking the wood. Just because I hadn't seen wood in forever didn't mean the reporter I was pretending to be hadn't. The privileged clearly had enough wood to line their hallways with it. Could it be from Earth? No, that was too much of a stretch. Larson opened a frosted glass door and breezed into a meeting room the size of my entire container.
Would you like a drink?
No, thank you. The windows beckoned. The view over Halow was... I didn't have the words. And now I did reach out and touch the floor-to-ceiling windows. They sloped gently inward, a quirk of the building's pyramid shape. Beyond, Calicto glittered far into the distance in a rainbow of color, light, movement, and beyond the habitat's curved domes, ion storms fractured purple skies. The only time I'd seen it from so high up, I'd been stowed away on a ship making its final approach. Living in Sage, cruising the Sinks, it was easy to forget how beautiful Calicto was from a distance.
I imagine you must have a view just like it from your apartment in... Where is it you live?
Larson had crept up beside me. It was the only explanation because I hadn't heard him move. His eyes sparkled, waiting for my answer. Oh, sure, of course. All the time. Really, I get bored of looking at it. He was testing me, scrutinizing me. I waved at the view like it was nothing and moved to the long wooden table. Is this oak?
It is,
Larson said. He crossed the room and opened a drinks cabinet.
You've seen oak before?
No, I lied. I mean, only on the datanet. I brushed my fingers across the glossy surface. And you actually made a table out of it. Like the old days, huh?
Call me a traditionalist. Besides, keeping trees behind glass in museums seems like such a waste.
He moved to stand beside the ornately carved oak chair at the head of the table. The table alone was worth more than my entire life's worth of possessions. The chair, carved by hand, was a work of art. I wanted to ask if both were from Earth, but wasn't sure whether I was ready for the answer. Maybe those rumors that he was of old world blood had some truth to them. So, Mr. Larson, Crater's assassination. What do you know about it?
Very little.
He poured himself a syrupy drink and lifted an empty glass, offering to fill it for me.
Are you sure you won't have some?
All right, a little. I needed something to stop my nerves from rattling. I hadn't expected to be met with such extravagance. Larson handed my drink over and sipped from his own glass. I tasted the drink and recognized it as a much smoother, finer example of the wine the boot served on special occasions. But no water. The man still had limits. I tilted the glass, acknowledging his kindness. Thank you. He seemed pleased and leaned against the meeting table.
There was nothing wrong with the equipment Archon installed at that establishment.
He briefly admired his view, watching a local shuttle slide on by, then turned his gaze on me.
It performed exactly as it should have.
By detaining the wrong people? He lifted his chin.
If you walk into a security scanner with hot weapons, they will react. It's what they do. Crater's men were the obvious threat in that room.
If that's the case, why did your equipment miss the assassin? He smiled, so confident.
The assassin wasn't in the room with him.
Did he know that for certain because he was the one who had hired the assassin? Or was it an educated guess? I couldn't tell by watching him, and I was usually quick to read people. He should have been simple to read. A suit at the top of his game, thousands of people below him doing his bidding. And yet, I didn't get that impression from Larson. His presence seemed almost small, but in a familiar, friendly way. Why do you think Crater was assassinated, Mr. Larson? He laughed a smooth, liquid laughter. The type women everywhere had no choice but to notice.
I have no idea. I imagine a man like that has many enemies. He was a wanted terrorist, correct?
Alleged terrorist.
Well then, I doubt the marshals will waste much energy in tracking down his killer.
Larson looked the part, spoke the part. There was no denying he was smooth and refined, like the wine we were both drinking,
But it didn't add up. Perhaps it was his smile. At a glance, it looked real, sitting prettily on his lips, but upon closer inspection, it seemed shallow, as though that smile was a mask hiding something else behind. But what? There was one simple way to test the man's involvement. Surprise him. I set my drink down on the table and looked Larson in the eye. What do you know of the proto-fae, Mr. Larson? The sparkle in his eyes sharpened, but as quickly as I'd seen it, the intense effect vanished, leaving me to wonder if I'd simply seen the exact reaction I had wanted to see.
The Fae? You aren't suggesting they had anything to do with a terrorist mine worker?
I let my lips curve at one corner. You're right, it's ludicrous. Who would believe a fae killed Crater?
Who indeed?
His laughter faded as he noticed I wasn't laughing along with him.
You're serious?
You tell me.
The Fae?
He almost snarled.
That's absurd. Nobody has seen one in
He grasped for the time scale.
what might as well be forever. A Fae couldn't get near Calicto, not with all this tech.
He definitely snarled that last word. But wasn't his business built on all this tech? Why the sudden disdain? What else do you know? His eyes narrowed.
What is this? Are you trying to implicate me in that man's death?
I don't need to implicate you when you've done a fine job of doing exactly that all by yourself. Do you often circumvent your own security and send illegal messages, Mr. Larson? The next time you do, you might want to use a fake name. Tension gripped his body, and gone were the easy mannerisms of Archon's friendly CEO. He straightened and stared through me without blinking. The full weight of his ocular-enhanced glare set my teeth on edge.
I think it's time you left, Miss Walker.
But I couldn't leave, not without a lead on the Fae who had stolen Soda. I think it's time you dropped the lies, Larson. A change came over him, like flicking a switch, and the man stilled. He tilted his head and asked softly,
Who are you?
I grinned and reached for my concealed whip. A nobody. The second I touched my whip, magic flared to life, upsetting my disguise. My illusion pixelated and dissolved in front of Larson's widening eyes. I flicked the whip, freeing its length, lassoed it around and lashed at Larson in a move I'd performed 1,000 times before. The whip would coil around his neck. I'd yank him forward and get my answers. Only, it didn't happen like that. Larson threw up his forearm, tangling my whip around his wrist, and he yanked, pulling me off balance. Not possible, my thoughts screamed as I toppled toward Archon's CEO. The magic should be burning through him. Unless he wasn't human. His fingers clamped around my neck, jolting me to a stop at arm's length. He squeezed, but only enough to hold me. Then he revealed that he, too, knew how to play the illusion game. Larson's smart young businessman appearance fell apart, just like my disguise had. His sandy blonde hair was the first to go, dissolving into dead straight blackness. The rest of him collapsed like a creature shucking off its shell. What lay beneath turned my heart to ice. The warfae.
You just sealed your fate, messenger.
A purring sound emanated from the back of his throat. He lifted me off my feet, into the air. I kicked out, hitting his waist, but he only smiled. Istvan Larson hadn't sent the assassin. He was the assassin.
Where's Soda?
I croaked. I couldn't use the whip in close quarters, and it didn't matter anyway. My magic wouldn't hurt the Fae. I groped for my pistol with my free hand.
Now? Likely dismantled.
No!
I gasped. Shock spilled numbness through my veins. I searched the Fae's bright eyes for lies, knowing they couldn't lie.
He wore the ocular implants to prevent anyone from seeing the truth in his glare. His stare didn't waver, didn't falter. Soda was truly gone.
It's better for me if the evidence disappears.
He had killed Soda. He had killed my drone. I yanked the pistol free and fired, not caring where it hit. The Fae howled and slammed me down. Timber snapped and pain crackled up my back, pushing in dark fingers of unconsciousness. I lay stunned, surrounded by fragments of Larson's oak table. The warfae appeared in my watery vision, drifting there like a dream.
You're a complication I didn't anticipate.
Hate burned the blur away. I saw him clearly now.
If word ever escaped that Istvan Larson was Fae,
He began and gestured around him at the huge meeting room.
that Archon was Fae, well, you can imagine how some might perceive it.
A Fae oversaw Halow's surveillance and security. The same surveillance and security that watched over hundreds of thousands of people on hundreds of planets. A Fae deep in the heart of human territory. He smiled at the horror on my face.
I see you understand.
He pointed a finger at me, mirroring my earlier threat.
You found me. And for that, you must die.
I plucked the stiletto dagger from my hair and flung it like a dart, straight at his right eye. It should have hit. It would have hit had he been human. But the bastard whipped his head aside at the last moment and the dagger sliced across his temple. He recoiled, staggering backward. Where he pressed his hand to his face, blood streamed between his fingers. I snatched my whip and pushed to my feet. My pistol was gone, but I couldn't fight him anyway. Not like this. I needed a plan. He was too fast, too strong, too Fae. There was only one way out of this. Run. With my whip uncoiled, I ran at the glass. A pistol shot barked. Something slammed into my back and punched through, tearing a hole in muscle and flesh. My last step buckled beneath me, but I had enough momentum to thrash the whip against the glass, igniting a spark. When my shoulder hit the window, glass shattered, and I fell through. For a few breathless moments, there was nothing around me but air and glittering glass. Then, I hit the 15-degree building facade with a shuddering oomph and started tumbling, over and over. I threw out both arms, stopping the roll. Leather squeaked on glass. My coat had tangled around my legs. I half skidded, half fell. I flicked the whip at passing nodules, the large bolts used to fasten the panels to the building. The whip's coils snagged on one and snapped me to a halt, wrenching agony through my arm. For a few thudding heartbeats, I stayed pressed against the glass, aware that something cool and wet dribbled down my side, but hardly caring. I didn't need to look down to know it was a long way to a sudden end. The circulating breeze fluttered across my face. I couldn't lose consciousness. If that happened, I wouldn't be waking up. Move. Giving the whip a jolt, I freed it from the bolt and slid downward, this time more controlled. Down and down and down, until my whip snagged another bolt, and then another. Finally, I landed on the ground and immediately pushed off to get out of the open. As I limped into hiding, bloodied and numb, I realized with a sinking sense of dread that this was a long way from over. It might even be just beginning. Chapter 4. My container door hung ajar. The neighbor in container 15 had his Virtua-vision up too loud. Music thudded against the walls and floor, muffling my approach. Blood dripped from my fingers while I lingered in the hallway, contemplating whether to venture inside or walk away and hope I didn't bleed out. My entire lower right hip fizzed unpleasantly. I'd lost feeling in my side, and tingling needles of pain jabbed their way down my right leg. The longer I left the wound untreated, the more damage I'd do, and right now, I didn't have the luxury of time to heal. I freed my whip and towed the door open. A figure loomed at the back, watching my fake rainfall. Broad shoulders carried an ankle-length coat. A mop of dark hair stuck out at unruly angles. I'd seen him before, earlier in the day. The Sinks hadn't killed the marshal, And now he was here, poking through my things. My neighbor's music ended suddenly, and silence fell over my container. My heart thudded too loudly, thumping in place of the beat. If I was going to leave, now would be the time, before he turned around.
Looks like someone went to town on your place,
The marshal said. He was right. Anything not bolted down had been tossed about and knocked to the floor. Some cupboards hung open, their contents shoved from inside, and one door hung from a single latch. The Fae, or someone connected to him, had been here. He knew where I lived, probably knew my name. It wouldn't be long before he knew everything. I shoved the door open wider and wandered in, towing through the mess. Had the intruder been looking for me or something else?
Is anything missing?
I blinked up at the marshal. Concern tightened his green eyes, and his gaze skittered down my coat, catching on the bloody patch at my hip, or my whip, neither of which I'd bothered to hide. I'm fine, I replied automatically as I reached for the lower storage unit and the med kit still lying inside. I straightened and spotted the marshal eyeing something behind me. My bloody boot prints led inside, indicating I was not fine.
I need to call this in.
He tapped his palm.
This is Marshal Kali.
His words petered off. I pretended not to notice how he struggled to find a signal and instead tore open the med packs. Luckily, the pistol's bullet had sailed right through. Otherwise, I would have needed to dig around my own insides to find its fragments. What are you doing here? I opened my inner jacket and peeled back the bloody and torn upper garment, revealing a gaping exit wound. A large nodule of dark blood oozed free. Nobody should ever have to see their innards.
One of your neighbors called in a disturbance. I was already nearby in the gully.
I jabbed a staunch pad over the hole just as the marshal moved closer and dropped my clothes back over the wound before he noticed any incriminating tattoos. Pain exploded up my side. I gritted my teeth, gripped the counter, and wrote it out. All things considered, I was lucky to be walking. Most Fae weren't sloppy enough to leave their victims breathing, but I doubted the warfae had expected me to leap out of his window. I couldn't stay here. He would send someone to kill me or come himself. More likely come himself. Twice now he'd surprised me, and both times he'd kicked my ass. I was off my game. My lips ticked. The head of Archon was Fae. In many ways, it was brilliant. Where better to hide than in plain sight? The idea was so ludicrous. Even if I told someone like the marshal, they wouldn't believe me. The Fae despised tech, and the head of the largest tech company in Halow was a Fae disguised as the charming Larson. I'd been there. He'd thrown me into an oak table and shot me, and I still wasn't sure I believed it. I frowned at the marshal eyeing my oozing wound, my thoughts muddied by pain and shock. He was staring like he might tackle me and take me in.
Earlier, in the sinks, we met,
he said. Some coincidence that you're here now. I grabbed another staunch pad, breathed deeply, and lifted the back of my upper garment to get a look at the entry wound. Crackling sensations danced through me, alternating between pain and numbness. He saw me wince.
You should have a doc check you out.
Yeah, I should. I gave him a look that dared him to ask why I wasn't getting medical attention, but the marshal glared back, not taking the bait. All he had to do was look around to know I was in serious trouble. I shrugged one arm out of my coat and tried again to get the back pad in place, but twisting made me want to throw up my breakfast bar. It didn't help that the marshal wasn't leaving, and I really did not want him or anyone to see the marks on my skin. He probably wouldn't know what they were, but it wasn't worth the risk.
Will you let me help?
He came forward. No! My bloody fingers slid across the pad, leaving tacky trails. This wasn't going well. Stay there! Don't come near me! He stopped, my pain mirrored in his eyes.
At least tell me what happened.
Why?
So when you pass out, I'll know what to write in my report.
I snorted a laugh, ditched the wrinkled pad, and used my teeth to tear open a fresh pack. Help get me arrested, more like. Like I said, Everything is fine, Marshal. I don't need or want your help. This time, I pressed the pad in the right place. It latched onto the good skin and plastered itself into and over the wound, sealing it tight. Pain throbbed deep and low and hot. Saliva filled my mouth and my vision blurred. But it passed. It always passed. The fix would have to do until I found somewhere safe to hole up. The Marshal had fallen silent, stewing on me, my words, and the situation. I figured he didn't much like being told no. He scanned the mess, reluctant to dismiss everything his instincts were telling him.
Do you have a license for that whip?
He asked for a second time, nodding at the whip I'd placed on the counter. I touched the whip. What whip? He pushed his coat aside and tucked a thumb into his pants pocket, revealing the pistol hitched at his hip.
Because if you don't, I'll need to take you in. You know the law regarding illegal possession.
His eyes had turned shrewd while that tightness to his lips had widened into the beginnings of a smile. I wondered if he smiled at all the criminals he was about to apprehend. Maybe he thought his looks might steal their hearts as well as their freedom. You do not want to mess with me right now, Marshal. I drawled from the corner of my mouth, hiding a sneer.
A crime has been reported. It's my duty to do everything in my power to see that any wrongdoer is brought before the law.
Wow! Wasn't his world so wonderfully black and white? His duty wasn't about helping me. It was about upholding the law, even if that law screwed me over. You going to arrest me? I pushed upright, dragging the whip with me.
Do I have to?
I took one last look at my home. There wasn't much here. In truth, it had never really felt like a home, just a halfway post between points A and B. And now Soda was gone, and there was nothing left here for me. A glance past the Marshal revealed the section of counter where Soda's dock had waited was empty. The dock was missing. Why would the intruder take the dock if the warfae had dismantled Soda? He wouldn't. Soda was alive. The Marshal still waited for my reply, his hand resting easily on his hip, so close to his pistol. Go back to upholding your laws and forget what you saw here. I turned my back on him. At least one of us can. A blur of cloaked movement shot through the open door. Something small, bright, and buzzing sailed over my shoulder and landed at the back of my container. The crackling ball hissed and spat, arcing out veins of electricity. Grenade! The Marshal's outline blurred, too fast to be human. He swooped in, snatched up the fizzing ball, whirled, his coat fanning out, and smashed his elbow into my projector screen and through the window. The grenade sailed through the hole. The blast hit a second later. A wave of noise and heat slammed through the window and exploded through my container. I recoiled, throwing my coat around me, and staggered against the assault on my senses. Alarms shrilled, inside my head or in the building. I wasn't sure. Fingers dug into my arms, and the Marshal was in front of me, mouthing something I couldn't hear through the ringing in my ears. I blinked, seeing something unusual in his mouth. Then he shoved me toward the shattered window, leaving me with no choice. I clambered through and hissed at the sting of jagged metal cutting into my hands. Alarms still wailed, drowning out everything but the thudding of my heart. I twisted to look back through the window for the Marshal. A figure cloaked in a shimmering exosuit had joined us. The intruder fired a two-pronged device, designed to deliver a shock into the Marshal's body. The barbed teeth sank into the Marshal's arm. Electricity danced down the connecting lines, but the Marshal did the impossible. He clamped a hand around the lines and tugged, pulling the intruder toward him. The Marshal's fist met the intruder's face and crumpled the metal mask inward. Blood spurted from the mouth grill, and the intruder dropped. But another dashed in, and behind him, another, both wrapped in exosuits that enhanced their strength and agility. The second stepped over his fallen companion and swung for the Marshal. He jerked to the side and threw the intruder back with an uppercut that almost took the guy's head off. I knew I should have been climbing down to the street below, but I couldn't take my eyes off the Marshal's terrible lethality. Was he Fae? But he didn't move with the same liquid grace they did. He fought brutally, no holding back, no fancy shit. The third intruder revealed a pistol,
but he never got to use it. The marshal moved in a blink, impossibly appearing behind the last assailant. He hooked his arm around the suited figure's throat and twisted. I didn't hear the neck break, not over the shrieking alarms. The last intruder collapsed. The marshal looked up, and I saw again what I thought I'd seen earlier. Sharp teeth. Our glares locked. He'd killed, and we both knew it. Not very lawman-like. His eyes asked, "What are you going to do with that knowledge?" I started down the mangled fire escape, avoiding the sharpest pieces of twisted metal. The street below had borne the brunt of the explosion and buckled under its weight. But the containers, although dented, had survived intact. People were emerging from their homes. Witnesses. The first responder bots would be here soon, and after that, it would be difficult to escape unseen. The marshal landed in a crouch beside me on the street and drew up to his full height. My container was too high to safely leap from the window. Yet more evidence he wasn't anything like what he appeared to be. But what was he? He tugged his coat straighter and eyed the swelling crowd. A lawman would take control. Probably arrest me, take me in for questioning and expose me to the kind of people who had already tried to kill me. But exactly what kind of lawman was he? I watched him closely, waited for him to reach for his weapon or his cuffs. That would be the right thing to do, but something told me he followed his own set of laws. If he battled with his morals, none of it showed on his stoic face. All the smiles and all the humor had vanished. He looked down at me for answers I had no intention of giving him. So, where did that leave us?
"Go,"
he said.
"You were never here."
I wouldn't hang around and question his attack of generosity, even if it was suspiciously nice of him. Collar up, chin down, I walked away from the crowd and the marshal, and slipped deeper into the gully. It wouldn't matter soon anyway. After I got myself patched up, I would leave Calicto. Larson, if that was his real name, had sent those intruders. The Fae knew too much. He saw too much. I needed space to regroup and plan, and then I would return. The truth hiding in my past demanded it. Chapter 5. Titillating music drifted from the boot as I pushed through the door into the bar. Julia was on stage, playing hauntingly beautiful music on an electric violin. She dipped and swayed, dreadlocks swishing over her shoulders. Beneath the floor of colored lights, she almost looked as though she were moving through water. When she played like this, people came from all around to spend all the V-coin they had just to listen to one more piece of music. I shivered off hot and cold waves and headed upstairs, passing by a homeless man on the stairs and 2 young women getting personal on the landing like it was their last night alive. The boot was the only safe place to hole up for a few hours while I planned how to get off Calicto unnoticed. I helped myself inside Julia's apartment and clicked the door closed behind me. Blues of all shades assaulted my eyes. Couch cushions, wall color, even the lights rippled a light, watery blue. She liked her blues. A shudder ran through me. The pistol wound needed attention. I peeled off my coat, revealing the blood-soaked staunch pads sticking to my waist and back. Going to an ER was out of the question. Larson might be looking for black spots in his Archon surveillance feeds. Black spots that would indicate how someone like me had fooled his scanners and got close enough to share drinks. Okay, so I had to get myself cleaned up before Julia got back. Her music still played its lullaby a floor below. I was safe here for a little while. Stripping off, I took to her dry shower. The pads dissolved under the chemical assault, leaving the puckered wound exposed. My stomach lurched at the sight. Covering it would make it worse. It needed sealing. I stepped from the shower, bunched up some towels, and pressed them to the freshly weeping wounds, ignoring the sickening roll in my gut. I'd had worse. I'd patched up worse, and I'd lived through worse. It had been a few years since I'd spent the night fixing myself up, but that shit didn't just go away. A quick search through Julia's bathroom cupboards revealed a well-stocked medkit. After digging out some drugs to numb the pain, I set about cleaning the wound and stapling its edges together. I was almost done when Julia returned.
Girl, what in the three systems are you doing to yourself?
Julia sashayed toward me, eyes wide. I was sitting in my underwear in her living area, surrounded by bloody swabs and my filthy clothes. Her doubled eyelids flickered and focused a little too hard on my chest. It wasn't my physique that interested her, but the dark, swirling marks that painted my skin. She couldn't miss them. They started at my calves, wove their way around my knees, up my thighs, and swept around my waist. From there, the black swirls spread out, flowing across my stomach and over my breasts. If she knew what they were, if so much as a flicker of fear widened her eyes, I would have no choice but to act.
That is some serious ink you've got there. Must have taken an age to laser in.
Only a lifetime, I thought, while picking up my discarded clothes. She wasn't afraid. She didn't know. Her ignorance had just saved her life.
I saw you come in. What I didn't see was how someone had gone to town on you.
Her gaze drifted to the array of bloody towels.
Are you okay?
I shrugged on my upper waistcoat, fastened it tight, and pulled on my pants. I'm sorry about all this.
Don't be, she waved a hand. Anything you need, always. You know that. You've helped me and mine out enough times. I owe you.
She approached and looked at me as though she might be holding herself back from wrapping me in a hug.
You got yourself in some trouble, eh?
A little, I admitted. I'm handling it. She grabbed 2 glasses from her kitchen area and filled them with something colorful and sparkly. When she handed mine over, I gulped it down so quickly it barely touched my throat. The warm tingling it left me with helped soothe my nerves. Part of me wanted more, wanted to drink so much that it numbed my thoughts and chased all of this away. 5 years I'd been on Calicto, carving out a new life. But the Fae being here, yeah, I was in a world of trouble. The kind that meant my life as Kesh Lasota was about to end, if it hadn't already. I handed the glass back. Do you mind if I rest up here, just for a few hours?
Course, Kesh.
She finished her drink and returned to the kitchen to pour another. But you might want to sit back down for what I'm about to tell you. More bad news. I followed her to the kitchen area and handed over my glass. She refilled it and handed it back. I gulped down a few more mouthfuls. I would need it. Go on.
Word on the feed is there's a hit out on you. 50 million.
The drink threatened to come back up again.
What?
I spluttered. 50 million V-coin was more than I'd make in a lifetime. A fortune for most folks on Calicto.
I figured you. There is no name, but they got the description right down to your coat and boots. That whip of yours is a big giveaway. The entire Sinks will be looking for you.
Who's bankrolling it?
Crater's gang.
Where had they gotten their hands on so much V?
You're safe here, she said, her eyes weary. But I can't vouch for anyone else. If someone saw you downstairs,
would Julia give me up? I looked at my friend with fresh eyes. She hardly knew me. I'd helped her out over the years, and she'd made sure her door was always open. But she didn't know me. I'd deliberately kept it that way. For that much cash, I would think twice about handing me over. I wouldn't even blame her for it.
Nobody saw, I whispered. They were all watching you.
50 million. That amount was beyond Crater's reach. They had help. The kind of help Archon might have offered them. I dragged a hand down my face, trying to wipe away my numb shock. I had to get off Calicto tonight. That kind of bounty would follow me into all the corners of Halow. The more folks looking for me, the more my past would get stirred up. I couldn't afford for the law or bounty hunters to pick me up. It was all coming undone. But what had I expected? Someone like me couldn't hide forever. The Halow system suddenly felt like too small a place.
Can I do anything?
Julia asked, reading the grimness on my face.
I shook my head. Rest up here, Julia said in a tone that left no room for argument. I'll keep an eye out downstairs. After she left to watch the bar, I fell back into the couch cushions, rested my head against the wall, and closed my eyes. I would have to whisper my way off Calicto and onto a ship. That was easier said than done. It's one thing to avoid security footage, quite another to disappear in front of real people. Once off Calicto, I'd buy myself some time to figure all this out. I hadn't planned on this. In truth, I'd stopped planning altogether and started living a life that didn't belong to me. This was my fault. The Fae were always going to come back. It had only been a matter of time.
You there, Saru! Stand!
I eyed the Fae through the curved bone-like bars. He held a prod with 2 nasty spikes in the end. Ghosts of old wounds throbbed down my back. His stony glare wasn't fixed on me, but on the boy in the cell next to mine, the boy with the elegantly sloped eyes and Summerland's skin. Older than me, by a few years, he had started growing into his body, filling out muscles, broadening into a well-bred male Saru specimen, and his Fae master had sent him here for training. I knew him as Eon, but his slave name, his real name, he had refused to tell me. I couldn't blame him. I hadn't shared my real name either. Some things were sacred, even to Saru. The Fae smacked the prod into the bars, sending a spray of sparks flying.
You will stand!
A vein pulsed at his temple, and his eyes glowed a sharp green. I knew his name. Dag knew. It meant bad blood. Eon slowly rose to his feet. His fingers twitched at his side. He lifted his head, tilting his chin up, and presented Dagnu with a defiant snarl. Defiance strummed through Eon's body. Pride quivered through his muscles. All things Saru couldn't own for long. Don't. I didn't speak the warning. There was little point. He wasn't the first to occupy that cell, and he wouldn't be the last. The Fae's lips twitched knowingly. I turned my face away. Eon would return broken, if he came back at all. A sudden sound jolted me awake. I blinked, clearing the fog of ancient memories or dreams or both. Why was everything blue? Blue walls, blue cushions. Julia's. I must have fallen asleep on her couch. I leaned forward and wished I'd stayed that way, stayed dreaming. Aches radiated through my battered body. That's what happened when you narrowly survived a warfae's attack. 3 times. The apartment door flung open and Julia burst in. You have to go! Now! I was on my feet, my hand on my whip. All dregs of sleep vanished. They found me. I flung a glance at her window. Not out the window! They'll be watching it! She scooped up my coat and shoved it into my arms. Do the illusion thing you do with the coat and go out the front. It's the only way. Who's here? The law. Her eyes saddened. Mary's dead. Mary? How had they found my source? Mary was careful, but surveillance watched her like it watched everyone. And now Larson knew me. Nobody was safe. Julia frowned and worry pulled at her mouth. Someone wanted to send a message, Kesh. It wasn't pretty. A crashing noise erupted outside the door. I threw on my coat and searched the inventory for a disguise while Julia lingered by the doorway. Quickly, Kesh. A disguise they wouldn't look at twice. Something they would expect to see in the boot. I jabbed at the scantily clad version of something one of Julia's ladies might wear and let my coat spill the illusion over me. Marshals? Julia drawled. Her door sprang open, and in stomped 4 heavily armed marshals. 3 men, 1 woman. I leaned against Julia's counter, fighting down panic, and arched an eyebrow.
Looking for something?
They ignored me and set about opening storage units, hoping to find the elusive messenger stuffed in a cupboard. The search didn't take long. Julia's place wasn't much bigger than mine. The marshals filed past me, heading for Julia. Like I told ya, she's not here. Julia rolled her eyes. Probably halfway to Neuron by now.
You left the downstairs in a hurry. Why?
The lead marshal drew up face to face with Julia. He was taller, broader, and likely felt he had every right to be here. Julia shrugged. Needed to pee? The backhand came out of nowhere and hit Julia's cheek with a vicious crack. She stumbled against the wall. I'd crossed the floor in 3 strides before realizing that getting involved would risk my illusion failing. The female marshal stepped in front of me. "Are you going to make this difficult?" she asked, eyes cold. Another crack sounded. Rage fizzed in my veins and warmed my chest. My heart thudded hard. I glared back at the woman, knowing exactly what she saw looking back at me. Julia and I were 2 nobodies, living in the unmonitored sinks where nobody gave a damn what happened. And the law would do whatever they wanted, claiming the reprobates had attacked them first. My disguise would hold so long as I didn't touch anyone and didn't charge the whip with magic. The second I did, the illusion would fall away, just like it had in Larson's suite.
We know she came in here.
The marshal beating on Julia growled. I couldn't see past the woman sizing me up for a fight, but the smell of rich, coppery blood told me all I needed to know. The 2 remaining marshals stood somewhere close behind me. I was outnumbered, outgunned.
You're going to tell us exactly where she went.
The bully hoisted Julia off the floor by her hair. Her right eye had already swollen shut, and blood marked her chin. "Don't," Julia muttered, but it wasn't meant for the marshal. And the dream was so close that I heard myself say the same word to someone else, so very long ago. Don't. But he had anyway, and no good had come from it. But that wasn't me. I punched Miss Marshall in the face, snapping her head back, and whirled, freeing my whip in a blur of movement. The illusion collapsed. Magic tingled up my arm, burning hot and free. I flicked the whip, charging it up, and cracked it across the face of one marshal. He screamed as his skin unzipped and magic cauterized the wound. The other marshal fumbled for his pistol. I kicked him in the chest, lassoed the whip around his neck, and yanked. Spluttering, he fell to his knees and clawed at the whip's coils. An arm hooked around my neck and pulled me backward against an armored chest.
There you are.
The bully purred in my ear.
I knew if I rattled the cage, you'd fall out.
I slammed my head back, hitting something hard with enough force for his grip to weaken. I'd lost my stiletto trying to blind Larson, but I wasn't without other weapons. Reaching into one of my coat's many pockets, I pulled out a handful of silver balls and threw them into the air. The balls hung suspended there, frozen in a blink, reading the scene, assessing for threats. And then, turning into tiny airborne razors, they struck, zipping past my face to sink into the marshal's. He howled, shoved free from me, and waved at the air, trying to shoo off the metal menaces. I grabbed Julia's arm and pulled her out the door. "Is there another way out?" She nodded, wiped the blood from her lips, and darted down the hallway ahead of me. We jumped down the steps and ran around narrow corners until Julia stopped at a hatch. She flung it open, and a waft of dry, metal-tasting air billowed upward. The chute would take me beneath the sink streets, where all the waste from the gully went. I touched her face. "I'm sorry." Her smile was fragile and wet with blood, but it held. "What are friends for if not beating up lawmen every now and then?" Friends. I hadn't had one in so long. And now I was leaving her in a whole heap of trouble. "Tell them I forced you to hide me." She nodded. "Make it worth it." Shouts rattled down the hallway. I stepped into the hole and fell. Chapter 6. Shuttles came and went from Calicto at regular intervals, ferrying mine workers to and from the planet's 9 moons, rich in silica and tungsten. I boarded a cramped and noisy shuttle that looked as though it had been bouncing between planets for a few hundred years. Stains dirtied the seats, and a fine layer of machine dust came away on my hands as I grabbed the rails and made my way to the back. All I had to do was hitch a ride on a freighter heading for outer Halow. Away from Calicto, the Fae probably wouldn't follow, and I'd have space to breathe, heal, and figure out how to get Soda back. Sinking into a tiny window seat,
I rested my forehead against the dirty glass and watched as the shuttle pulled away from its dock and maneuvered through Calicto's environmental locks. 20 minutes later, the little shuttle was accelerating into Calicto's abrasive atmosphere. The walls and floor rumbled, rattling every loose bolt and its passengers. I gritted my teeth until the shuttle eventually leveled out. Calicto's vast environmental domes glittered below like a collection of bubbles on rocks. From the outer atmosphere, those domes sparkled and shone, looking idyllic. I remembered thinking the same thing when I'd first arrived 5 years ago. The Fae painted all humans as animals. I'd been expecting hideous living conditions and a brutal existence. What I'd gotten was something between the two.
Is this seat taken?
The marshal gripped the pole and swung himself into the seat beside mine, filling the cramped space with his coat, his wry smile, and all his pretty manliness. Shimmying past his knees was out of the question. There was nowhere to go. The shuttle wouldn't dock for another few hours. I was stuck with the lawman, and his lopsided grin told me he knew it.
What are the chances of me meeting you here, huh?
His dark green eyes sparkled at some secret joke only he knew. I ignored him, or tried to. Clearly, he was going to be a problem. He still wore his long coat. It didn't appear to have any enhancing abilities, but as an expert at deception, I knew there were other ways to hide the truth. He would be armed, and I knew he was a killer. "You just happened to be traveling to the colonies, Marshal?" I asked, making small talk.
Something like that?
He'd been tailing me. There was little point in avoiding the obvious. "How did you find me?"
You're not as invisible as you think you are.
I shot him a pinched, tight smile. I had gone to great lengths to whisper my way across Calicto and onto the shuttle, so the Marshal was either full of Karu shit, or he was very, very good at hunting people down. "Do enlighten me." He leaned back in the seat, getting comfortable, and why not? Neither of us was getting out of this conversation anytime soon.
Once I had a feel for what you are, I looked for surveillance black spots, dead space, tech glitches. Followed you right here.
He let that sink in for a few moments, appearing to absently watch the people around us, and then added,
You were at the crater assassination.
My smile vanished. I checked the faces of those nearby. Burly men, haggard women. Some might be Crater's people. Most were lost in their personal entertainment devices. But if any heard the Marshal and suspected me, it wouldn't take much to fire off a message and organize the kind of welcoming party I wouldn't wake up from. I narrowed my eyes at the Marshal. He was dangerously close to getting in my way. "You going to arrest me, Marshal?" He twisted in his seat and looked me square in the eye, issuing a challenge.
You keep asking me that. Do you want me to?
The shift in his position had bumped his knee against mine. He didn't appear to notice, but I did. He had hemmed me in. "Isn't arresting people what you do?"
Guilty people?
He corrected.
It's an important distinction.
Important distinction. Damn, his tight accent slew me. It wasn't a Calicto dialect. Maybe he originally came from one of the farming colonies where dynasties dealt in crops. Focus. It doesn't matter where he comes from. "Ah, so you're an honorable Marshal. Well, aren't you cute?" His lips twitched.
Sarcasm doesn't suit you.
I touched my chest and gasped, eyes wide. "Really? I can't imagine why." Turning my face away, I pretended to stare out the window at the star-speckled blackness, but instead studied the Marshal's reflection. His smile faded before vanishing completely, leaving his expression somewhere between concerned and curious. I might have imagined the pointed teeth I'd seen when he killed the intruders. They weren't there now. Perhaps those lethal weapons only came out to play when things got rough. As an expert at illusion myself, I wondered if the Marshal's pretty was camouflage, and beneath all that alluring male plumage lurked a shrewd and dangerous lawman who had me firmly locked in his sights. He had followed me this far, but now that I knew I had a tail, I would ditch him at the next port. All I had to do was survive the next few hours without giving anything away. And if I was right about the marshal, he was about to try everything in his little black book of charm to get me to talk. If you're not here to arrest me, why are you here? What do you want?
Call me curious.
I'd call him something all right. The shuttle's engines whined, signaling it was slowing down. But out of the window, we weren't anywhere near atmosphere. The marshal leaned out to peer around the standing passengers and narrowed his eyes. He caught me watching him closely and pressed his lips together, apparently annoyed. Whatever was happening, it wasn't good. The shuttle jolted, and the pilot announced over the comms,
Please stand by for inspection by the Port Authority. Just when I think it's safe to talk, someone tries to kill you.
The marshal slipped a hand inside his coat. Wait, what? I reached for my whip. He removed his hand and dangled wrist cuffs between his fingers. I jolted away, pressing my back against the window to force some space between us, but there was no room to swing the whip. He snatched my wrist and ratcheted the cuffs on with a click. He gripped his cuff with his fingers, not latching it on.
Hold still.
Hold still? I hissed and yanked on the cuffs. You said you weren't arresting me! Nearby passengers glanced our way. The marshal yanked me forward and leaned in, bringing me nose to nose with him. There was no laughter in his eyes now. His glare captured mine and held me still.
I'm not arresting you. I'm helping you. Like I've been trying to since the beginning. Now sit still and shut the hell up.
Who in Halow did he think he was? I balled up my fist and swung, anticipating the satisfying crunch when I broke his pretty nose. He caught my knuckles in his palm, close enough to his face to ruffle his messy bangs. Green eyes glared, their startling intensity another reminder of how the marshal wasn't entirely human. His gaze warned that, should I try anything, he would retaliate. Screw our audience, screw the authority about to board. He would throw down right here, and only one of us would walk away. I'd seen what he was capable of. A cramped interplanetary shuttle was not the place to test him, but once we got outside, all bets were off.
Marshal?
An authority official nodded down at us.
Who do you have there?
Beady-eyed and pointy-chinned, he looked like he hadn't laughed once in the last decade. I almost felt sorry for him.
Cattle rustler.
Seriously? He was going with that lie? I looked about as likely to be a cattle rustler as he looked like a miner. I rolled my eyes. At least he was terrible at something.
I'm taking her in for processing. Destination? Catacomb.
The authority man raised an eyebrow, probably because we were heading completely the wrong way to be docking anywhere near Catacomb. As ruthless as my marshal was, his lies needed work.
Name?
The authority guy asked.
Marshal Kali.
Authority man jerked a thumb at me.
Her name.
The marshal sighed.
You know,
He said to me.
This isn't working.
He pulled a pistol from his coat and, swish, click, boom, shot the man in the chest. The authority guy sprawled backward, spilling into onlookers. Screams rang out and the crowd surged. I froze. Did he just kill that man?
It's set to stun.
Marshal Kali explained, dragging me off the seat by the cuffs and into the heaving crowd. He shoved and elbowed his way through, pulling me behind him. At the door, where the other marshals fought to keep the masses back, Marshal Kali lifted his gun into the air and fired off an energy round. Sparks exploded overhead, the crowd dropped, and the authority men went for their weapons.
I'll be needing your shuttle.
The marshal told them.
What?
One stammered. His gaze fell to the star on the marshal's chest.
Your shuttle is now mine.
Kali said, without a shred of doubt.
Step aside.
Nobody moved. Kali wet his lips.
I have a very dangerous criminal in custody, and I am commandeering your ship so I can safely escort her to the processing facility on Calicto.
Blinks all around.
See this?
He tapped the star pinned to his coat.
This means what's yours is mine.
He pointed the pistol at the nearest guard's face.
Do I have to get personal?
Violence. The universal language. The authority cops stepped aside, and Kali pulled me through the airlock doors, swiftly locking them behind us. Pressurized air hissed. He let go of my cuffs and dropped himself into the pilot's seat. The shuttle was tiny compared to the ferry we'd spent the last hour on. Big enough for a 2-man crew, but little else.
You'd better sit down.
He flicked a bunch of switches on the control panel.
I don't plan on hanging around while they realize I just bluffed my way into stealing their ride.
I eased into the co-pilot's chair and watched his hands sweep across the controls with efficient ease. You don't have the jurisdiction to commandeer this ship? He snorted and nodded at the front-facing screen curved around us.
You see that?
I saw a whole lot of black nothingness outside.
Out here, messenger, jurisdiction is just a word like any other. It all comes down to the delivery.
He strapped himself in and hit a button that disconnected our shuttle. A mechanical jolt trembled through the floor.
And who's holding the biggest gun?
I strapped into the co-pilot's seat. The marshal entered what I assumed were coordinates back to Calicto. I watched his hands closely, committing each button push and entry to memory.
You're some hot property, Kesh Lasota.
I side-eyed him. I didn't recall telling him my name.
Those weren't real Port Authority officials.
He pushed a button, and the shuttle bolted into the black, rattling the cabin.
My guess is they were Crater's men, and your shuttle ride was doomed from the beginning. Like I said, you're not as invisible as you think.
He glanced over.
Have I done enough to prove I'm not out to get you?
That depends on where we're going, and what you want from me.
To a rock in the middle of nowhere.
He flicked his screen and sent our destination onto my screen. He was right. We were headed out into deep space. Not much out there but rocks, criminals, and pirates. Which one was he?
Are you going to tell me what's going on?
He asked. I shifted in the chair, sinking deeper into its embrace, and eyed the cuffs still locked around one wrist. If only I could, Marshal. Chapter 7. Marshal Kelly removed the cuffs as soon as the shuttle was locked on course. We traveled the rest of the way in silence, until a tiny, shining mass took shape beyond the shuttle's screen, growing like snowflakes on the glass. I peered closer. What is that? The marshal glanced sideways and must have seen the anxiety I was working hard to hide.
You don't travel much, huh?
No, not much, I admitted, trying not to let on how this was only the second time I'd been spacebound in my entire life. I gripped the seat's arms, digging in my fingernails. During my first spacefaring trip, the ship had been huge, so vast, in fact, that it had felt as though the planets moved around it. This little shuttle felt more like a ration can. The marshal nodded at the growing station, its branches spinning lazily.
That's Point Juno. We're in Halow's outer system. That station is about all that's around here unless you want to travel a few days farther toward the debris zone. There's a few unregistered points out that way, built by scavengers mostly.
Closer and closer we drew, pulled as if by some magnetic force, until the station filled the screen. Specks of dust fluttered between Juno's jutting branches, buzzing back and forth. Ships. I pushed to my feet and leaned over the shuttle controls. So many ships. I caught the marshal watching me and settled back in the seat, shrugging off the sight like I saw enormous space stations every day. He chuckled, sparking a filament of annoyance inside me. Not at him, but at myself. I was better at hiding my thoughts than this. I had to be better. The marshal swept the shuttle under one of the station's arms, threading it through buzzing traffic. Colored lights blinked, painting the scene in neon greens and pinks. Our little shuttle seemed to speed up now that we were close to the station's superstructure, but the marshal's hands deftly maneuvered us around, up, over, and through. My gut lurched as the shuttle dipped. My nails bit into the seat. Was all this whooshing normal? The marshal's gaze was glued ahead, switching from the controls to the window. He didn't seem concerned. By the time the marshal spun the shuttle around and locked it in a dock, sweat dampened the back of my neck. He turned and paused after seeing my face.
Are you okay?
I stared at a static point ahead, some kind of antenna array. Whatever it was, It helped anchor me and stop my head from spinning. I'm absolutely fine. I would be fine once my head stopped spinning and the motion sickness passed. He unbuckled himself from his seat, keeping his face turned away, and headed to the rear of the shuttle.
It takes some getting used to.
His deep voice rumbled with repressed laughter. I couldn't summon enough energy to care. Pressure seals hissed, and a welcome blast of cool air swept into the shuttle. Peeling my trembling body out of the seat, I breathed in, filling my lungs with fresh air, and touched my whip. The weapon's coiled energy skipped into my palm, and my magic threaded warm fingers across my skin. The combination of pleasure and pain distracted me enough to put one boot in front of the other until I had passed through the depressurizing locks into a single-level apartment. Low couches grouped in one corner, a table and 2 chairs occupied a spot by the window, and outside, glittering metal funneled to a patch of black space. We were in what I assumed was the marshal's home, inside the station's belly. He shrugged off his coat, draped it over the back of a couch, and crossed the apartment, rolling up his shirt sleeves past the elbows, revealing well-defined, bronze-skinned forearms. He had the physique of a manual laborer, something used to physical exertion, not a paper-pushing street marshal. He stepped behind a counter, hands working across some flat panels with the same familiarity as when he'd piloted the shuttle. A soft sound rang out, and 2 drink containers rose out of the countertop. He scooped one up and took a long drink. I watched his throat move and trailed that movement down to the gaping neckline. He set his glass down and finally noticed me at the door.
You can come in. I don't bite.
His gaze lingered on me, and mine on him. There was a challenge in the way he looked at me. It had been there from the first moment we'd met in the sinks. But what kind of challenge, I wasn't yet sure. Was he daring me to contradict him? Waiting for me to figure him out? I took another step inside, and the pressured door automatically hissed closed with a comforting weightiness behind it. The vacuum of space was right outside, way too close for my liking. It occurred to me that I was 1,000,000 miles from my home, on an unfamiliar waypoint in an unfamiliar part of space, with no knowledge of how to pilot a shuttle, and my only company was that of a lawman who I knew could be lethal. I shrugged off my coat and laid it over the couch, next to the marshal's. He wasn't so tough. He was just one male, albeit his species was unknown. My whip was safely stowed inside my coat. If the marshal was as innocent as he claimed to be, then I wouldn't need it. But if he tried anything, he'd soon learn my whip wasn't my only weapon. The apartment was functional, clean, tidy, minimalist, and about 5 times the size of my box. As I roamed, I found nothing personal, unless a small fishbowl with one lonely fish bobbing inside could be categorized as personal. It and its fish, however, were worth a fortune in water. I snorted at the extravagance. What kind of archaic fool keeps a fish in a bowl filled with priceless water? The space looked like a show apartment or a hotel room. He didn't spend much time here. Or perhaps this was where he brought all his women before. Whatever guys like him did out in the blackness of space. No, that wasn't fair. Was the marshal dangerous? Yes. I'd seen how dangerous he could be. But, so far, he had only shown me kindness. He clearly wanted something from me. How would he react when he didn't get it? I reached the counter after giving myself the tour and picked up the drink. Nice place. Must have cost a pretty amount. He leaned a hip against his side of the counter and didn't reply. Not bad, for a marshal. The drink tasted like water with a touch of lime. It wasn't water, but it was damn close. How could a Calicto lawman afford all this?
I wasn't always a marshal.
He admitted.
That's a new career.
He picked up his drink and headed toward the couches. Without his coat hiding his outline, I studied the confident way he moved. Broad shoulders carried a man who didn't know how to hesitate. No wasted gestures, no wrong step. It helped that he had an easy stride and a tight ass I would have liked to admire for a lot longer than the minute he gave me as he reached into a panel in the wall and revealed a slim personal interface screen. A seat emerged from the wall. He settled into it.
There's a shower out back and a private bedroom. Make yourself comfortable. I have reports to file. Then I'll ask you some questions and you're going to answer them.
He didn't look up, just sipped his drink and tapped away on the PI screen. If he believed it would be that easy, he had the wrong girl. But I'd take advantage of his hospitality. After downing my drink, I headed for the back rooms.
Kesh?
My name on his lips pulled on an invisible string, bringing me up short. When I looked back, the marshal rubbed a hand across his chin, carefully measuring his next words.
You're safe here.
Safe. Safe was an interesting concept. In this place, in this system, I wasn't safe. Safe was a refuge inside my mind. Safety wasn't something anyone could give me, but it was a nice idea. Whatever you say, Marshal. I left the room and heard him say,
Call me Kali. Can you at least do that?
Blood dripped from my fingers and pattered against the dusty ground, falling like the rain. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. Dampness on glistening leaves and on my tongue, too. Wetness and blood, but not my blood. A fluttering sound to my right, buzzing in my ear. The curious pixie hissed close, stirring my matted strings of hair. I bared my teeth at its twinkling light and the creature darted off. Like the pixie, but from somewhere far away, I was observed by curious fae. They looked down on me, untouchable, like gods. Other pulsing lights danced in the dark. I ignored them and listened hard. Listened to the rapid beat of my heart, to my blood pumping through my veins, filling me up, making me something more. Movement shifted to my right. I didn't hear it so much as feel it. Inside, in what they called the animal part of me, I knew I was no longer alone. My slick fingers curled tighter around my knife's oak handle. I imagined I heard those watching, imagined they chanted my name. They knew what was coming. They loved me for it. And somewhere inside, deeper than the hate, deeper than the injustice, I loved them too. Eyes glistened in the dark, human eyes, gently sloped. Eon. And in his hand, an oak-handled knife shone, just like mine. I blinked awake. There one moment, here the next. My heart hammered against my ribs, trying to break free. The dream would leave me soon, but while it had its claws in me, I couldn't move. Didn't dare. The pitter-patter of rain on thick, fat leaves beat against my thoughts. The wetness still hung in the air. So much water it fell from the sky, as did the blood. And Eon. I shoved from the bed too fast, almost staggering over my own feet. Whose bed is this? Where in the three systems am I? The walls, the floor, the bed, the smell. Like warm, spicy male cologne. Where the... I pressed a hand to my head, squeezing out the past, making room for the present. The shuttle, the authorities, the marshal, the station, the assassination, the fae. I am Kesh Lasota, messenger, tech whisperer. I am invisible. Kesh Lasota, right. And this room, this was the marshal's place. I'd lain down, just for a few minutes to rest my eyes. How long had I slept? A weary weight had settled in my bones, now replaced by stiffness. I'd slept for hours, not minutes. Damn it. Soda may not have hours. I headed for the door and paused, realizing I was barely dressed. Tossing on my outer garments, self-cleaned and patched up while I had rested, I strode out into the living area, expecting to find Kali where I'd left him, monitoring his screen. The ambient light had softened, indicating resting hours, but there was no sign of the marshal. My coat lay on the back of the couch. The marshal's was missing. Throwing on my coat, I turned, considered heading for the main door and spotted the glimmer of Kelly's personal entertainment screen extended from the wall. Leaving it open and unattended? He wasn't used to having company. As I sat behind it and swept my hands across the semi-transparent interface, it also became clear that the marshal hadn't set up his console for someone of my talents. My fingertips tingled, and at my hip, my whip warmed, sensing my latent magic coming to life. I sidestepped the marshal's woefully inadequate security measures. His PI opened like a flower, revealing everything the marshal had been working on while I'd been sleeping, which was apparently me. A blurry image flicked across the screen, a figure caught in motion crossing a plaza. Around the person, people were frozen statues, their images encased in electronic ice. The figure was a ghost, but to anyone who knew exactly what they were looking for, the gait, the coat, the hair. The figure was clearly me. The next slide showed a bounty issued on behalf of Crater's organization. The V-coin payout had enough zeros to make coordinates jealous. I looked up, over the screen, at the plush apartment with all its luxuries. Of course. I was another notch in Kelly's bounty hunting belt. Crater's men would likely descend at any second. Worse, Archon might be about to latch a shuttle to the private dock. Kelly had set me up. He wanted all the V-coin. I shoved from the seat. I had to get out of the apartment and off the station. The apartment door swung open, and the marshal sauntered in, white bag in hand.
Good. You're up.
He dumped the bag on the counter.
I didn't want to wake you.
He was at ease, comfortable in his own home and his deception. I'd seen him fight. He was fast, brutal, and efficient, but only when he saw the strike coming. Right now, he was vulnerable. My whip hummed gently against my thigh.
I brought you lunch.
He chattered.
When did you last eat? Must have been a while ago.
I sauntered toward the counter, catching a whiff of something sweet and spicy. My mouth watered. There would be time to eat once I had the marshal subdued and piloting the shuttle away from here. Suiterin food? I asked.
It is.
He seemed surprised and distracted as he collected a couple of plates.
You've eaten Suiterin before? It's rare around these parts. I hear they can't give it away near the debris zone. I've often thought about flying out there just to see if it's true.
I eased my hand inside my coat. Why haven't you? I asked, keeping up the easy conversation. His eyes flicked up. He reached for the bag. Power surged up my arm, licking over the whip's tech and charging it with lethal force. The length of the whip flew upward, aglow with magic. The marshal was gone. The cool kiss of a blade touched my neck, biting just below my ear. He hadn't pulled me back, but he didn't need to. His breath tickled the hair over my ear. The knife did all the talking for him.
If you don't like Suiterin, all you had to do was say so.
He'd angled himself to the side, knowing not to stand directly behind me to avoid any backward headbutt I may have been considering. My whip collapsed into a coil of metal chain on the countertop, and my magic fell away with it.
That's one fancy whip. Almost like it has a mind of its own.
Maybe it does, I replied softly. If he was going to hurt me, he would have already. He shifted slightly. The gritty edge of the knife dug in. I didn't feel it cut. The blade was too sharp, but I felt the trickle of blood slide down my skin and inside my collar. He leaned his hip into my lower back, careful to keep the pressure on without hurting me.
Do you have anything else inside that coat you're considering flinging at me?
He asked. Wouldn't you like to know? He had probably already rummaged through the dozen pockets. He wouldn't have found anything. The coat knew when to keep its secrets.
I know it's not the food. Suiterin is damn good. So why the sudden hostility?
His tone held an edge. It wasn't as sharp as his knife, but it still cut open old wounds. The blade nicked over old scars. Goose flesh scattered down my neck and farther. It had been a long time since someone had gotten the best of me, warfae excluded. How do you afford this place? I asked.
I told you. Previous work. Now, why don't you answer my questions, seeing as I'm the one with the knife?
What does it matter? You're just going to hand me over to Crater's men anyway. Quiet swelled, softened only by the humming of the circulation filters.
You hacked into my PI?
Hacking is so clumsy.
All right. You whispered your way in.
He shifted against my back.
Do you think you know me, Kesh Lasota?
I knew no human could outmaneuver my whip. I knew Marshal Kili liked to bend the rules to suit him. And I knew he had no reason to keep me alive, or keep me safe, if not for the bounty. I had nothing to do with Crater's death, I told him. The miners will kill me and ask questions later.
I believe you.
I smiled. But it doesn't matter what you believe, right? You're just in it for the V? The knife vanished, along with Kali's weight against my back. I dabbed at the blood on my neck and turned, catching a glimpse of sharp incisors behind his slightly parted lips. I'd expected to see anger on his face, maybe some resignation. The heat in his glare burned away any snide remarks. He breathed too hard for someone under control, and for the first time, an icy finger of fear traced down my spine. I hadn't believed he would kill me, but something had changed. He turned his face away and swallowed. The bloody knife trembled in his hand.
I'm not about to sell you out.
He ground out the words, still looking to the side. No, I see that now. You're about to kill me. Whatever you say, Kali. He flinched at the sound of his name and drew in a deep breath. It seemed to center him enough for him to look me in the eye without snarling. But something slithered behind his skin. Something he kept so well hidden that I only now began to understand just how dangerous Kili might be. What are you?
You have a hard time trusting people,
He remarked, moving around the counter to resume emptying his suitor-in takeout. He moved differently. Gone were the smooth, confident gestures of a man in control. Now, he moved as though, with every grab at the food cartons and every snatch at the cutlery, he was teetering on the verge of snapping.
But you need to trust me.
Was he joking? I'd be a fool to trust the thing I'd seen lurking beneath his skin. He was wound so tight he almost charged the surrounding air. He dumped a plate in front of me.
Eat the damn food.
The spread looked delicious, fruity with something like noodles and brightly colored vegetable slices tossed in. Was it drugged? My stomach growled. He growled deep and low at my hesitation.
I won't harm you, but you're testing my patience, Lasota.
He stalked off and disappeared toward the back of the apartment. I heard a door close. If Marshal Kili didn't want the bounty, what did he want from me? I eyed the door, my escape route, knowing what I had to do. But running wouldn't solve this. He would find me again. I picked up a green shoot covered in syrup and bit down. He was right. The food was good. I was halfway through the dish when I realized the marshal had taken his bloody knife with him.